Welcome back to Fast Market on the TD Ameritrade Network. I'm Tom White, joined by my co-host Kevin Hinks. But let's bring in our next guest for our cash tag segment. It's going to be Landon Swan, the co-founder of LikeFolio. Welcome back to the show, Landon.
Hey, Tom. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. So we're talking another retailer, Nordstrom. Shares are up about 2% so far this year, outperforming. It was trading about $38 a year ago levels. Now, this is, I guess I want data on what we're seeing out of the consumer, because this is the mid to higher end consumer. They've been a little bit more resilient in this inflationary pressure that we've seen on the economy recently. But it seems like every time Nordstrom's set up to do well, they disappoint and maybe they guide lower or, inventory issues. What kind of data are you seeing from consumers about Nordstrom? Because they just got done with their anniversary sale, which is usually a boon for them. But is the consumer showing some resilience and traction here?
Yeah, I know. I mean, if you look at, well, first of all, I think we should look at Macy's. I mean, they just reported they had a pretty strong reaction from the market, up about 5% today. So I think that's maybe what's helping Nordstrom today, pulling them up a little bit. But when we look at the kind of comparison between the two, I'll jump right to the earnings scores. Macy's was a plus 35 going into this report. Nordstrom is a minus 15. So I think we could have a little bit of false confidence going into this report from Nordstrom. A minus 15, a negative 15 is not, a strong bearish signal, but the discrepancy between the two, they're 50 points apart, and Macy's had a nice reaction, and Nordstrom is being pulled up a little bit. And so I think the expectations could be off. I think they could, maybe be a little bit disappointed with the results that we have coming in. What we're seeing is that overall, Nordstrom is down a little bit on purchase intent. Their happiness is very high. They have very happy customers. And they have some things working in their favor, some things working against them. So if you look at in-store shopping, mall shopping, even e-commerce, those are all up double digits year over year. People talking about doing that kind of shopping. But so is deal discovery, and Nordstrom is, it's a little bit higher end, and so deal discovery is working against them a little bit. Inflation concerns are working against them a little bit. But as you mentioned, it's a more resilient customer, not as affected by some of the price increases that we've seen. So overall, I'd say that, we're neutral to slightly bearish, probably more in the neutral camp. Without Macy's data, but now that Macy's has come in and it's kind of pulling Nordstrom up, the contrarian in me wants to say, you know what, I think you investors may be surprised that they're not as in line with Macy's as you may think. So they had a very strong report last quarter. Revenue was up significantly year over year. The stock reacted extremely positively. I think it was like 14%, something like that last quarter. So Nordstrom had a nice report last quarter. I'd be surprised if they blew it out this quarter. I would not expect something like that. I expect probably flat or maybe a little bit down on consumer reaction, on investor reaction, excuse me. But I can tell you the data for happiness, which is what we're looking at here, very strong. I think it's 71%. That's beating, for example, we're talking about Macy's. It's beating Macy's. They're at 63%. So Nordstrom has a very happy customer base, and they are talking about how people are coming back to the stores. They're looking for the designer brands and designer shoes for those long-awaited occasions. I know I'm starting to get wedding invitations that I haven't seen. I haven't got a wedding invitation for like a year and a half, 2 years. And all of a sudden, we're starting to get those. So people push those kind of things off. And now that they're coming, you got to go get the new clothes and the new shoes to match. And Nordstrom is going to be a beneficiary of that. So overall, neutral, maybe leaning bearish if expectations were inflated because of Macy's.
Landon, this company breaks down nicely as it's got its full price Nordstrom stores, it's got the Nordstrom Rack, and it's got digital, right? It's got the ability to move around these segments. And Nordstrom Rack seems to be doing extremely well and carrying a lot of the weight for Nordstrom throughout this. This is not a very big company. It's smaller than everyone thinks. Landon, is Nordstrom Rack enough to keep this full price company going? Because Nordstrom Rack seems to be carrying a lot of the ball, and their digital sales, right? You're right. They still, for them to be firing on all cylinders. They need people to come back to the more affluent malls where Nordstroms are held. But these Nordstrom racks have diversified what they do and where they make their money. Landon, do you guys break down any data between the full price and the Nordstrom rack and the digital? Is there any data there that might give people a little hope that some of the discounters might be doing well?
Yeah, so I mean, when we look at people, talking about deal discovery, they want to save money. That's up 31%. If you look at the earnings report last quarter, Nordstrom Rack was up about 10%, whereas the whole company revenue was up about 19%. I'm very interested to see how that shapes up on this report, because I think way more this quarter than last, people are going to be price sensitive. So I would expect Nordstrom Rack to be leading the charge even more so. I think that investors that are looking for a strong e-commerce growth may be disappointed. We're seeing, again, plus 12% year over year on e-commerce mentions, but their last report showed that they were about flat. They're about 39% of sales right now, but it was no growth over quarter. So I'm a little concerned that maybe their e-commerce is slowing down a little bit relative to their peers, but I do think that you're right. Nordstrom Rack is going to give them that, the diversity of it being able to appeal to people who are a little bit more price sensitive. And if it's not, if they have a hole, that's where it's going to be, because I think there's a huge opportunity for Nordstrom Rack right now. And so I think that investors are going to want to see growth there. They fell behind a little bit last quarter versus the overall growth of the company. But I think that they're set up this quarter to outperform the overall company. So we're going to see on a percentage basis. I do agree, though. I think that's a very important metric to look at.
Now, Landon, when you look at Nordstrom, I think it's about partnerships that they have with the higher end brands, stores within a store almost. Do you see any data points on those? I know you're relatively neutral on it going into earnings, but could this be one of the caveats for this company during this earnings report where, hey, there's still demand for the higher end because that consumer hasn't been hurt by the inflationary pressures as maybe a low-end retailer might, which might save, their quarter?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's probably Nordstrom's strength, is that their customer, who was it? Was it Chipotle that came out and said our customers aren't poor, basically? Right. So Nordstrom kind of has that same kind of customer. So I think they could be more resilient. And Kevin, just FYI, I looked it up. Nordstrom Rack is weaker than Nordstrom overall. So the data that we have, at least, is showing that Nordstrom Rack is not picking up the same amount of consumer enthusiasm or demand as the brand overall. And that could be a little concerning for investors, since people looking for those better deals, looking to stretch their dollars. That's definitely a growing group, growing demographic. But in the data that we have, the LikeFolio data, Nordstrom Rack is underperforming Nordstrom as a whole. So that could be a weakness seen in the earnings report over the next 24 hours.
And Landon, by the way, maybe not getting invited to those weddings, two of the saddest words in the English language are what party? Maybe you just weren't invited? I don't know. You seem like a pretty good guy.
Hey, I'm getting invitations now, so I think it was a COVID thing, but maybe you're right. Maybe I'm less popular than I thought.
No, I think that's more of me, Landon.
Maybe check that envelope, Landon. Make sure that envelope is heavy enough, because once that word gets out.
All right, Landon. Point. Great stuff as always. Yeah, great stuff as always, Landon. Have a good day.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
All right, that's Landon Swan, co-founder of LikeFolio.